All right, Tom. So here's a quick video. We'll separate this into a couple of things. First thing, the IMS solution. Here's your oil pan. No debris in there. There was nothing in the filter. I think you have the pictures. The ignition coils and plugs, I would definitely do the coils. And the plugs, just due to age. While I have the coils out, it makes sense to do them. I'll go ahead and reseal your oil pan here. Here's what your sump looks like without the pan on it, in case you were curious. Everything else is original back here. The water pump matches the color of, this is your water pump here, you can see the pulley matches the color of the block. Therefore, I would say that is original, so I would recommend replacing that as we discussed. I did go ahead, I always verify the engine number to make sure it's the original motor to the car, because if it was a replacement motor, depending on what year it was replaced, it might have a non-serviceable bearing. So this is the original motor to the car. No real leaks, maybe a little bit of seepage from the rear main seal. That's pretty typical, or IMS flange. Your rear axles are fine. Moving on to other subjects. The outer, inner boot, outer boot. I almost forgot, well, didn't forget, but I didn't look at the front end since we're kind of working on that. But your two front axles, the outer boot at least, and I'll have to pull this panel off to check the inner. That boot is ripped and leaking, as you can see, and so is this one. It's made a mess. I had to rebuild these on that car as a Carrera 4. I've done those. So I can rebuild these. I'll send an additional estimate to rebuild these front axles. I would recommend doing that. If you're happy with the way the car rides, the shocks are fine, but the bump stops. Let's see. See that piece of foam in there, how it's all deteriorated? That's very common on these cars. They just deteriorate. But if you ever get to the point where the car is riding, you can see that one's completely gone, I think. But if you ever get to the point, Tom, where the car is riding really rough, or where you'll notice it in particular is if you're in like a supermarket parking lot and you go over some speed bumps and it just feels rough, or I'm sure you've been in a car with bad shocks. Usually these shocks, they start going bad by age, not really mileage. So in the future, that could be something you might want to consider upgrading if it's affecting you. I did drive the car, it feels fine to me. To replace those boots, I would not on the shock. Requires removing the shock and taking the spring off. I wouldn't recommend, if we were going to do that, I would just recommend replacing the shocks, to be quite honest with you, because the labor is the same. But I wouldn't worry about that. I think we should, personally, in my opinion, I think we should concentrate on the IMS solution, those front axle shafts. Then let's take a look at your brakes while we're here. So your front rotors have a little bit of a lip on them, but I don't see any cracking between the holes. These rotors, they could crack. The brake pads, sorry, I'm trying to get an eye on it here while holding the phone. Your front pads are, to be honest, they're about halfway worn, a little past halfway worn. The rear rotors are fine. They have a very small lip. And let's take a look at the pads. Sorry, you're not gonna be able to see what I'm seeing. The pads are, I'd say, at 2/3, like 66% life. So in my opinion, I wouldn't touch the rear brakes on this car. I would bleed the brakes if the fluid is original. The fronts, I would probably throw front pads on it and maybe rotors, just due to the lip. That would be my opinion, so I can revise that estimate to do front rotors and pads. The rears, I think you're okay. I mean, you could probably get away with using these rotors, but that lip is starting to get here. You can see on the inside, a little bit significant here. And if we're gonna do pads, it's up to you. But I would recommend doing that. If the alternative is, Tom, is you can wait until you'll get a brake wear indicator light on the dash, which, looking at these pads, you might not get for another couple thousand miles. So that could be an option if you wanted to wait and not do anything to the brakes. That's up to you. If it were my car, I kind of like to get the life out of everything. You know, if you're happy with the way the brakes are functioning, I would just roll with them until you get that brake wear indicator light. You're not going to hurt anything by wearing those pads down. And then, you know, in a couple thousand miles, they could last. You might not get that light for 2,000 miles, or it might go 5,000 miles, or it might go more. It just depends on how hard you are on the brakes. And I'm sorry, I know this video is dragging on, but I like to really take my time to kind of explain these things. That way you're not just, you don't feel pressured into doing anything. So you can go ahead and think about that. Everything else under here looks good. You can see the grease kind of splattered in here from that axle. I will usually takes a bunch of brake cleaner to clean up this hub. You can see the grease just makes a mess everywhere. So I'll get that all cleaned up. I don't really do tires. I kind of sublet that to Discount Tire, to be honest, but these tires look fine. These tires look fine. You know, of course the rears wear twice as fast as the fronts, as I'm sure you're aware of. The rattle that you noticed in the door is actually, it's not that flap that's broken, because if you hold that flap, the rattle is still there. So the rattle is probably going to be a loose screw on the speaker cavity. I can pull that door panel off and look. I'll be honest, I have a similar rattle in this car, but it also has solid or stiffer engine mounts, so kind of everything rattles in it. And I had a couple of loose screws. I'll take a look at that and see if I can fix it. I'll let you know, but I'll just have to take the door panel off. But I'm going to concentrate on getting the IMS solution water pump coils, and then your clutch done first. And I assume you're probably going to want those front axles done, just because they're throwing grease everywhere. And hopefully the joint's probably not worn, but I will check that out really well and send you an estimate on that. So I guess the only other fluid I could potentially do would be your front differential fluid. That's up to you. The car has 50,000 miles. It doesn't hurt to do that. We are doing the transmission fluid, but I appreciate you bringing this car in. It's really clean. It's a nice car. I did drive it. It drives well. It's got good power. So putting this solution in will help you keep this car on the road much longer. And I'll stop rambling and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Tom.